Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. I literally have a coffee with me. I'm drinking my coffee as we look at this article here, and you couldn't ask for a better, interesting piece to read on a Wednesday morning. And if you want articles that relate to end-time Bible prophecy, and this is pretty amazing. Are the temple vessels ready for Purim? So the article is about these temple vessels. Items required for the temple are suddenly appearing in Israel, interestingly. And this is from breakingisraelnews.com. It says, as Jews celebrate Purim on Wednesday evening, it may be significant to consider the, quote, recent appearance of many, if not all, of the temple vessels that played a subtle yet significant role in the Purim story. How is it that temple vessels are suddenly appearing? Would that speak to the possibility that a third temple is on the horizon, that something is coming soon? How are these just suddenly appearing? And it's just incredible to think that they have everything. I don't know of anything that they're waiting on outside of the red heifer to be able to purify the instruments that they're waiting on before they can actually start temple sacrifices outside of, obviously, the third temple itself. Well, let's look at some of the vessels here that apparently have recently appeared. And I would suggest to you that the timing is just perfect, and God knew that, and everything is set up and on God's timeline. It says, although the story of Purim takes place entirely in Persia, remember that's Iran, and was not connected to any temple rituals, the holiday is connected to the temple and Gula, redemption, in several less obvious points. It says, according to Jewish tradition, Persian king Ahasuerus served the feast described in the beginning of the book of Esther on the sacred vessels of the Jewish temple. So the gold vessel is the first thing. When the king considered the temple vessels for use at his drunken feast, this is where he used and abused temple vessels, basically, in a obviously very unholy manner. First on the list would have been the gold and silver decanters used for libations on the altar. Last Sukkot, a new gold vessel was used for the first time, did you know that? In a reenactment of the water libation ceremony. In a full-dress ceremony, Kohanim, the Jewish men descended from Aaron the priest, so the priestly class of Jews, if you will, led the procession from the Temple Mount to the Shiloh spring. Amidst celebrations, they brought the container of water to a replica altar where the ceremony was carried out. So did you know that? Did you know they're carrying out these things? Did you know a new gold vessel was created? The Temple Institute, I don't know if the Temple Institute created that specific one. I suspect they did. But the Temple Institute is responsible for creating basically most of the vessels that they have not otherwise found. And so what is another recently appeared temple item? Silver trumpets and ram horns. So it says, though not mentioned explicitly, it is conceivable that perhaps even probable that the drunken king would have called for the musical instruments seized from the Jewish temple. Music was a central feature in the temple service, and such the Temple Institute prepared several types of silver horns for use in the third temple. So the Temple Institute has silver horns for the third temple. These are all ready to go. Harps. Perhaps viewed as ancient a version of the electric guitar, the harp was a staple of temple music. Jewish tradition states that the temple had an astounding 4,000 harps, it says. The Herreris American hippies transplanted in the Holy Land were tasked by the Temple Institute over 30 years ago with recreating the temple harp. So these are all things ready for a third temple. And you can see, the building of acknowledgement and awareness of the Jewish people of the third temple, and all these instruments and all these converging for the holiday of Purim. How about Kederet? Of course, a drunken Persian feast would call for sweet smells, and the plunder from the temple most certainly included a substantial quantity of the very special incense that was an essential element in the temple service. In an astounding tale, read this. This is incredible. A group of Noahides discovered an ancient cache of 600 kilograms of the original temple incense more than 25 years ago. Perhaps even more astonishing is that the temple treasure had gone unnoticed by mainstream media and archaeologists, stored away at an undisclosed location, waiting until it's needed. So, incredibly, God, I don't know if God has all this planned. God knew all this stuff would come out in the last days. God does not want the Jews to create a third temple because he wants them to recognize him directly and recognize the Messiah directly. But this is all part of the timeline of anti-Bible prophecy. This stuff is all converging to the point where a third temple is built and effectively they're ready to go. This is why when the Antichrist comes and confirms the covenant that the Jews can start temple sacrifices pretty much immediately. It's incredible. Menorah and oil. So here's a big one. The true fate of the golden menorah from the Second Temple is unknown. A relief on the Arch of Titus in Rome depicts it being carried away after the temple's destruction. The Temple Institute prepared a full-sized replica that is currently on display near the Cardo in Jerusalem's Old City. Covered in gold, the menorah is acceptable for use in the temple and is intended to stand in the third temple. So, again, Temple Institute, they rebuilt a golden menorah, and its purpose specifically is to stand in a third temple and be used. Copper scroll. It says, whenever the temple vessels are mentioned, the copper scroll necessarily comes to the forefront. Discovered in 1952, the copper scroll is simply a list of gold and silver items from the temple and the 64 locations where they can be found. This is basically a guideline, a map of what all the implements were and where they need to be in the temple, basically. Jim Barfield, a retired arson investigator and Noahide from Oklahoma, argues that he is the key to finding the precise locations of the temple treasure. The only thing preventing him from retrieving the temple trove is lack of permission from Israeli Antiquities Authority. But as soon as he does, Israel will have a collection of temple vessels that would put King Ahasuerus to shame. And it's interesting to think that, and there's been a lot of speculation out there that there are a number of people, rabbis, and this particular Jim Barfield, apparently he knows where some stuff is, on the Temple Mount around Jerusalem, buried in secret places and secret tunnels around the Temple Mount, etc. And they're not allowing digging into these tunnels and such. But what could we find? And by the way, one thing that would be very significant, hugely significant, incredible find, which would really turn the world upside down, would be the discovery of the Ark of the Covenant. And there are rabbis, Jewish leaders, who say they know where it is. There are people who say they know where it is, and that it will be revealed at the right time. This article says, with so many temple vessels either recreated or rediscovered, it is clear that actual reinstatement of the temple service is at hand. This is the article writer, a Jewish person from BreakingIsraelNews.com, and they're saying that the temple service is at hand. It is interesting to note that the creation of the vessels before the construction of the structure is precisely the opposite of the process of building the tabernacle, it says. Rabbinic tradition tells of a dispute between Bezalel, the artisan who built the tabernacle, and Moses, the Israelite leader and prophet. The Israelite leader and prophet commanded Bezalel to fashion utensils first and then construct the tabernacle. Bezalel demurred, suggesting that the house is built first and then filled with furnishings. Ultimately, Bezalel's concept was the guiding principle that led to the construction of the tabernacle. This article says, indeed, the plans to create the third temple in Jerusalem are well advanced. In addition to the vessels above, calves are being raised in order to reinstate the ritual of the red heifer. This is what I referred to. An altar is prepared. It's already being created. That can be lifted onto a flatbed truck and delivered to the Temple Mount at a moment's notice. The Kohanim, the priestly class, they are ready to go. A registry of Kohanim lists candidates to lead the service. I'm reiterating, they don't need anything at this point in time outside of the red heifer and the actual third temple building to initiate sacrifices. It says oil for the menorah and for the grain sacrifices is prepared every year in the painstaking manner mandated by Jewish law to ensure purity. It says it says the last line, and we'll end with this. In fact, Rabbi Yisrael Ariel, founder of the Temple Institute, told Breaking Israel News that if the Jews today were given the opportunity to jumpstart the temple service, it would require a mere few hours to do so. A mere few hours. I can't even read the last line. It would require a mere 4 hours, rather, to do so. 4 hours is what Rabbi Yisrael Ariel says to get the altar in place, to get the implements in place, to get everything in order, to get the Kohanim all gathered together. You send them a text message, say, get to the Temple Mount ASAP, we're starting temple sacrifices, to get these people ready, to get them in their garb, to get items purified, etc., ready to go. And what do we see in the last days? We see at the start of the 7-year tribulation, when the Antichrist confirms the covenant, the carrot will likely be that temple, because it says in the middle of the 7-year tribulation, the abomination of desolation occurs, where the Antichrist sits on the throne in the third temple, declares himself as God, and that means, and also I should say, ceases the sacrifices, stops the sacrifices from occurring, which means sacrifices must have been occurring, and also means that the third temple was rebuilt at that time. It was existing at that time, which means it likely was rebuilt at the start or just prior to the start of the peace deal. Probably part of the peace deal, like most suggest, is that the third temple will be able to be rebuilt. The Jews will have a place on the Temple Mount, and this will be part of the carrot on the stick for the Jews to accept the peace plan. Incredible article, and I think prophetic. Recent appearance of many of the temple vessels. I think that's a miracle in a sort of a way. It's a prophetic timeline revealing thing, and it's incredible. All this and a lot of this getting ready for Purim to be used. Some of these, and also all to be used in the third temple once rebuilt, and we think that sooner or later. I think we're less than probably 2.5 years from now before the start of the 7-year tribulation, which means the third temple, at from that point of view, could be started at any time now, realistically, if this peace plan comes out and discusses the third temple. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll leave it there for today, and we'll see you guys in the next video.